The Pale Boy.
God.
I never
We are
believed in
both
ghosts until one
human
appeared
bones and
under my
medical
bed.
waste.
What I didn't realize then was that this pale, hollow-eyed child wasn't there to torment me. He was trying to save me. This is a true story. Every detail I'm about to share happened exactly as I remember it, in a house where no child should have lived with a father whose work would haunt me long after I escaped. When I was 6 years old, my life seemed perfect. My name is Miguel Valenzuela, and I grew up in a spacious house in an upscale neighborhood outside Mexico City. My father Javier provided well for us, my mother Elena, my younger brother Diego, and me. We had everything other families in our area envied: new clothes every season, the latest toys, a big yard with fruit trees. My father bought me a collection of die-cast metal cars every month, each one detailed with perfect miniature headlights and rubber tires that left tracks when I rolled them across the wooden floor of my bedroom. But even at 6, I sensed something wasn't right. My father's explanation for our comfortable lifestyle never varied. I take care of an important man. When relatives or neighbors asked what he did, that was his only answer, delivered with a finality that discouraged further questions. At dinner, he would sometimes get phone calls that made him leave immediately, no matter what we were doing. Sometimes he wouldn't return until morning, his clothes immaculate, but his eyes hollow, like something inside him had been temporarily removed. My mother never questioned where the money came from, at least not when I could hear. Late at night, I would sometimes catch snippets of tense conversations behind their bedroom door, my mother's voice rising in frustration before my father's low, measured tone silenced her. The first time I saw the boy was on a Tuesday afternoon in October. The memories burned into my mind with a clarity that hasn't faded in 20 years. My mother had bought me a new set of 5 metal cars: red, blue, yellow, green, and black. I was lying on my stomach on the bedroom floor, lining them up in a perfect row, making them disappear under the bed and emerge on the other side. That's when I saw him. At first I thought it was a trick of the shadows under the bed. The space beneath seemed darker than usual, despite the afternoon sunlight streaming through my window. But as my eyes adjusted, the darkness took shape, the outline of a child lying flat on his stomach, mirroring my position on the other side of the bed. My breath caught in my throat. The boy was about my age, maybe a little older, but something about him was profoundly wrong. His skin was unnaturally pale, almost translucent, like he'd never been touched by sunlight. But it was his eyes that made my blood freeze, completely white, no pupils, no iris, just milky voids that somehow still seemed to see me. For several heartbeats, neither of us moved. Then slowly his lips stretched into a smile. It wasn't a child's smile of joy or mischief. It was dry empty, as if he'd learned the expression by watching, but didn't understand what it meant. I wanted to scream, I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't respond, frozen by those empty white eyes locked onto mine. The boy lifted one hand, pale with fingers too long and thin for a child, and beckoned to me as if inviting me to join him in the darkness under the bed. At that moment, Diego burst into the room, breaking the spell. "Miguel, Mama says dinner's ready." His voice, high and innocent, shattered the heavy silence. I jerked my gaze away, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I looked back, the space under the bed was empty, just shadows and dust bunnies. "What are you doing?" Diego asked, coming closer to see my cars. "Nothing," I answered automatically, my eyes still fixed on the empty space. "Just playing." That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smile, those fingers beckoning me closer. I lay rigid under my blanket, staring at the ceiling, afraid that if I looked toward the floor, those white eyes would be watching me from the darkness. At breakfast the next morning, my mother noticed the dark circles under my eyes as she served me a bowl of cereal. "Didn't you sleep well, mijo?" she asked, stroking my hair. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to describe the boy under my bed with his strange white eyes and beckoning fingers. But something stopped me. A deep feeling that she wouldn't believe me, or worse, that she would worry unnecessarily about something that might have been just my imagination. "I had nightmares," I said finally. She nodded sympathetically. Sometimes nightmares come because something is bothering us. Is there anything bothering you, my love? I shook my head, focusing on my cereal. My father entered the kitchen then. He wore his usual attire, black shirt, dark pants, perfectly polished shoes. It didn't resemble any uniform I recognized from my friends' parents who wore overalls, office clothes, or casual attire to their stores. His appearance was different, impeccable, but somehow threatening. "Good morning," he said, kissing my mother on the cheek before ruffling my hair. "Everything okay?" "Miguel had nightmares," my mother explained. My father studied me with an intensity that was unusual. "What kind of nightmares?" His tone made me nervous. It wasn't the casual question of a concerned father. There was something else, as if he was searching for a specific answer. "I don't remember exactly," I lied. "Something about monsters." My father nodded slowly, keeping his eyes on me a moment longer before pouring himself coffee. "Monsters don't exist, Miguel," he said finally. "Remember that. What you need to fear in this world are people, not fantasies." Over the following days, I saw the pale boy several more times, always under the bed, always smiling, always beckoning. He never spoke, only occasionally made a dry sound like breathless laughter, as if something was obstructing his throat. I developed strategies to avoid him. I stopped looking under the bed. I would leap onto the mattress from a distance so he couldn't grab my feet, something that seemed entirely possible in my childish mind. I stopped playing with my cars on the floor. My behavior didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, when my mother found me playing on my bed instead of on the floor as usual, she sat beside me. "Why aren't you playing on the floor anymore, Miguel? You always liked having more space for your cars." I swallowed, considering whether I should tell her. "There's something under the bed." "Something like what?" "A boy," I said, finally, my voice barely a whisper. "A boy who looks at me and wants me to come closer to him." I expected my mother to laugh, to tell me it was my imagination, or worse, to be angry with me for making things up, but her face visibly paled. "What does this boy look like?" she asked, her voice tense. "Pale, with white eyes. He doesn't talk, just smiles and beckons to me." My mother remained silent for a long moment. Then, without saying anything more, she rose and left the room. I heard her speaking quietly on the phone, though I couldn't make out what she was saying. That night my father came home earlier than usual. He and my mother had a long conversation in their bedroom behind closed doors. I couldn't hear anything, but when they emerged, both looked worried. "Miguel," my father said, sitting on the edge of my bed, "your mother told me what you saw. I want you to know there's nothing to worry about. Sometimes when we're children, our imagination is very powerful. We see things that aren't really there." "But I did see him, Papa," I insisted. "He's there." "He watches me." My father exchanged a glance with my mother. "Let's do something," he said finally. "I'm going to check under your bed right now, and you'll see there's nothing there. Then I'll stay here with you until you fall asleep. Does that sound good?" I nodded, though I wasn't convinced. My father knelt and looked carefully under the bed, even using his phone's flashlight to illuminate every corner. "See, there's nothing here," he declared, standing up. "Just dust and some lost toys." That night, my father kept his promise and stayed seated in a chair next to my bed until I fell asleep. It was the first night in weeks that I managed to sleep deeply. But the peace didn't last. The pale boy returned the following night and the next. I no longer saw him only under the bed. Sometimes I felt his presence in the room even if I couldn't see him. A change in the atmosphere, a feeling of being watched. Occasionally I heard his dry laugh in the darkness or felt as if something was lightly tugging at my sheets. The worst nights were when I woke up feeling a weight on the mattress, as if someone had sat on the edge of my bed. I would lie motionless, pretending to sleep until the sensation disappeared. With the passing months, something strange happened. I grew accustomed to his presence. The fear never completely left, but it became familiar, like living alongside an aggressive dog. that for some reason never directly attacks you. I developed a routine: don't look under the bed, don't mention the boy to my parents, so they wouldn't worry and try to ignore the sensations and sounds. When I turned 8, my father announced we would be moving to an even larger house in a better neighborhood. "Work is going very well," he explained during dinner. "We can afford a better place for all of you." My mother smiled, but I noticed the joy didn't reach her eyes. There was something else there, a worry she didn't express in words. The new house was impressive. It had 2 floors, a huge garden, even a small swimming pool. My brother and I would have separate bedrooms for the first time, something that excited me. I naively thought we would leave the pale boy behind, that he would remain in our old house under the bed we had abandoned. I was wrong. On the first night in the new house, as I arranged my things in my new bedroom, I felt a familiar chill. I resisted looking, but the temptation was too strong. Slowly, I turned my head toward the new bed, and there he was, peering out from beneath the mattress with that same empty smile. His white eyes seemed to glow in the dim light, more visible than ever. I froze in place. How was this possible? How had he followed us here? "You're not real," I whispered, more to convince myself than for any other reason. "You can't be real." The pale boy tilted his head as if considering my words. Then, without breaking eye contact, he extended his hand toward me, the abnormally long fingers moving like spider legs. I backed away until I hit the wall. At that moment, my mother knocked on the door. "Miguel, dinner's ready." When I looked back, the boy had vanished. During dinner, I was quiet and barely touched my food. My father, who rarely dined with us due to his work, noticed my behavior. "Don't you like the new house?" he asked, direct as always. "It's not that," I replied. "It's just that—" "What?" "The boy. He followed me here." My father's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. My mother dropped the water glass she was holding, spilling its contents on the table. "Miguel," my father said in a voice so controlled it was more frightening than a shout, "I've told you there is no boy. It's your imagination." "But I saw him, Papa. He's here in my new room." My father stood up so abruptly that his chair fell backward. "Enough. I don't want to hear any more about this imaginary boy." "Understood." I nodded, surprised by his reaction. My father rarely raised his voice, especially with me. My mother hurried to clean up the spilled water, not looking at either of us. That night, when everyone was asleep, I heard an unusual noise coming from the hallway. It sounded like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. Slowly, I got out of bed and approached the door, opening it just a crack. What I saw chilled me. My father was in the hallway, dressed completely in black, despite the hour, speaking quietly on his phone. "No, I haven't told him anything," he whispered. "But the boy knows. Somehow he knows. Yes, I understand. I'll take care of it tomorrow." Who was my father talking to at this hour? And what did he mean, "the boy knows"? Was he referring to me or to the other boy, the one nobody believed existed except me? I silently closed the door and returned to my bed, feeling that something much bigger and more terrifying than a ghostly boy was happening in my family. From then on, I began to notice strange things not only related to the pale boy but also to my father. Sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, I would find him staring fixedly at dark corners of the house as if looking for something or someone. Other times, I heard him talking to himself in his office, and when I entered, he would abruptly fall silent. But the most disturbing incident occurred approximately a month after the move. I was alone at home. My mother had gone shopping with Diego, and my father was working as always. I heard someone calling me. "Miguel," said a voice identical to my father's. "Come here. I need your help with something." The voice came from the backyard. I looked out the window but saw no one. "Miguel?" The voice sounded more impatient this time. "Come right now." It was exactly my father's voice, with that authoritative tone he used when he wanted to be obeyed immediately. Without thinking twice, I went downstairs and headed to the yard. There was no one there. Just the wind gently moving the trees and the distant sound of traffic. "Papa," I called, confused. Silence. I was about to go back inside when I felt a chill run down my spine. Slowly, I turned toward the small shed at the back of the garden where my father kept tools he never used. The shed door was ajar, and for an instant I thought I saw a pale face peering through the crack. White eyes without pupils. A joyless smile. I ran back to the house, locked all the doors, and hid in my room until my mother returned. When I told her what had happened, she seemed genuinely concerned. "Are you sure you heard your father's voice?" she asked, sitting beside me on the bed. "Completely sure," I replied. "It was his voice, Mama. Exactly the same." My mother looked at me for a long moment before speaking again. "Miguel, there are things you don't understand yet. Things about your father, about his work. But I need you to trust me when I say everything will be okay." "What things, Mama? What does Papa really do?" She looked away. "Your father protects important people. That's all I can tell you now. When you're older, you'll understand better." That explanation didn't satisfy me, but I understood I wouldn't get more information at the moment. That night, as I tried to sleep, I thought about the pale boy, my father's voice calling me to the yard, and the secret that seemed to envelop my father's work. Somehow I felt it was all connected, though I couldn't understand how. As the weeks passed, the pale boy's appearances became more frequent and more disturbing. He no longer limited himself to watching me from under the bed. Sometimes I found my toys moved as if someone had been playing with them. Occasionally, upon returning to my room, I smelled a strange odor like damp earth mixed with something sweeter and more putrid. One morning I discovered small, muddy footprints on my bedroom floor, footprints that didn't match my shoes or anyone else's in my family. They were smaller, with strangely elongated toes. I cleaned them up before anyone else saw them, though I wasn't sure why I did it. My behavior began to change. I became more reserved, more cautious. My teachers noticed that I startled easily and sometimes seemed to be listening to something no one else could hear. My grades started to decline. The school called my parents for a meeting. That night I heard them arguing in their bedroom. "We can't go on like this," my mother was saying. "It's affecting the children. He's changing. He's afraid all the time." "And what do you suggest I do?" my father replied, his voice an angry hiss. "Quit my job? Do you know what would happen if I tried to leave it? We could go away, disappear, change our identity. Don't be naive, Elena. They would find us, and then the children wouldn't just be scared, they would be—" My father's voice cut off abruptly. There was a long silence, and then the sound of footsteps approaching the door. I quickly moved away and pretended to be heading to the bathroom when the door opened. My father stood there, his face an impenetrable mask. "What are you doing up at this hour, Miguel?" "Just going to the bathroom, Papa." He studied me for a moment as if evaluating me before nodding. "Go then, and straight to bed afterward." "Yes, Papa." As I walked away, I felt his gaze following me, calculating and cold in a way I had never noticed before. Something dark had shifted in our household, something far more terrifying than any ghost could ever be. The Pale Boy Part 2. The cars became my first real evidence. One morning shortly after our conversation in the hallway, I woke to find my toys arranged in a perfect circle on the floor. I knew I had left them in their box the night before. I had been meticulous about putting them away ever since the Pale Boy first appeared. Someone or something had taken them out while I slept. My favorite car, a shiny red one with black details, was missing from the circle. I searched everywhere, crawling on hands and knees to peer under furniture, checking every corner of my room. It was nowhere to be found. When my mother asked why I was so frantically tearing apart my room, I couldn't bring myself to explain. How could I tell her my toy had been stolen by a ghost boy that only I could see? 3 days later, the red car reappeared on my pillow while I was at school, but it wasn't the same anymore. The once smooth metal surface was covered with tiny markings, as if someone had taken a pin and scratched intricate patterns all over it. I picked it up, carefully studying the strange symbols under my desk lamp. They weren't random scratches, they formed patterns repeating symbols that looked almost like language, but nothing I recognized. The patterns were mesmerizing somehow, both beautiful and disturbing. I spent hours tracing them with my fingertip, wondering what they meant and why the pale boy had marked my favorite toy this way. Was he trying to tell me something, driven by a curiosity that temporarily overrode my fear? I smuggled the car to school the following day. During library time, instead of reading the assigned book, I pulled out every volume on symbols, ancient languages, and occult markings that I could find. Most were too advanced for an 8-year-old, but I flipped through them anyway, searching for anything that matched the markings on my car. In a dusty tome about Latin American folk magic, I found a symbol nearly identical to one of the markings on my car. According to the book, it was used as protection against evil spirits in certain indigenous traditions. The caption explained that the symbol was believed to bind malevolent entities and prevent them from causing harm. Protection. The thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. What if the pale boy wasn't trying to frighten me? What if he was trying to protect me? But from what? That night I did something I had never dared before. I waited until the house was quiet. My parents' bedroom door closed, the soft snores of my brother drifting from his room. Then I sat on the floor beside my bed, the marked car placed in front of me like an offering. "I know you're there," I whispered into the darkness. "What do you want from me? Why do you follow me?" At first, nothing happened. Then gradually I felt the atmosphere change. The air grew heavier as if gravity had subtly increased. An unnatural cold began to spread from beneath the bed. And then I saw him not just peeking out, but emerging completely. This was the first time I had seen his entire body. He was smaller than I'd imagined, almost fragile, dressed in worn, dirty clothes that seemed from another era. His skin wasn't simply pale, it had a bluish tint like that of a drowned person. His limbs were too long for his torso, especially his fingers, which curved like claws, but his face was the most disturbing. Seen this way up close and complete, I could notice details I had missed before. His lips were cracked to the point of bleeding, but what dripped from them wasn't blood, but a dark, thick liquid, almost black. His eyes, those white, empty pools, weren't completely smooth as I had thought. They had small black veins extending from the edges toward the center like cracks in a porcelain doll. He stood before me so close I could have touched him if I had extended my hand, something I would never have done voluntarily. The smell emanating from him was penetrating, a mixture of wet, earth-rusted metal and something sickeningly sweet I couldn't identify. He opened his mouth, revealing an incomplete set of blackened teeth. But instead of speaking, he began to emit that sound I'd interpreted as laughter, a dry, raspy gasp like someone struggling to breathe. Then, to my absolute terror, he extended his hand toward me and touched my forehead with one of those abnormally long fingers. The contact felt like an electric shock. Confused images invaded my mind, a man screaming, kneeling before another whose face I couldn't distinguish, blood spilling onto a concrete floor, my father standing next to a motionless body, meticulously cleaning a long, shiny object. When the images stopped, I was lying on the floor, uncontrollably shaking. The pale boy had vanished, and the car with him. I didn't sleep that night trying to understand what I had seen. Were they memories, visions, or simply my mind overwhelmed by fear, creating fictional horrors? The worst part was that one of the images showed my father in a situation my childish mind couldn't or didn't want to comprehend. But it raised disturbing questions about who my father really was and what exactly taking care of an important man meant. From that night on, the pale boy's visits took on a new character. He no longer seemed content to merely observe me or try to frighten me. Now he seemed to want to show me something, to communicate in some way. Sometimes strange objects appeared in my room, a shirt button that didn't belong to anyone in my family, a piece of paper with an address written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Once even a small rusted crucifix stained with something that looked like dried blood. Each time I found one of these objects, I experienced the same sensation as when the boy had touched me, a flash of violent and confused images that quickly faded, leaving me with more questions than answers. My behavior became erratic. I started having recurring nightmares in which I saw my father doing horrible things to unknown people. In my dreams, he always turned to me at the end and said, "This is what it means to take care of an important man, Miguel. Someday you'll understand too." I would wake up screaming, and my mother would come running to my room, but I never told her what I had dreamed. Somehow I felt that doing so would put my family in danger. At school, my performance continued to deteriorate. I isolated myself from my friends, spending recesses alone, obsessively drawing the symbols I had seen on my car. One of my teachers, concerned, called my parents for a private meeting. When they returned home, I heard my mother crying in her bedroom. My father called me to his office that night, something he rarely did. "Your teacher says you've been drawing strange things," he said without preamble, showing me some of my drawings that the school had shared with them. "Where did you see these symbols, Miguel?" His tone was casual, but there was something in his gaze that put me on alert. An intensity that wasn't normal. "I made them up," I lied. "I like their shapes." My father observed me in silence for what seemed like an eternity, as if evaluating the truthfulness of my words. "Miguel," he said finally, "you know you can talk to me about anything that worries you, right? Whatever is happening, we can solve it together." There was a tone in his voice I had never heard before. Was it fear, genuine concern, or something more sinister? "Everything is fine, Papa," I replied, keeping my expression as neutral as I could. "They're just drawings." That night the pale boy didn't appear, nor the next. For almost a week there were no signs of him, and I began to wonder if he had finally disappeared from my life. My hope was premature. One Saturday afternoon, while playing alone in the backyard, Diego was at a friend's house. I heard a noise coming from the shed, the same structure where months ago I thought I had seen the pale boy peering out. I approached with caution. The door was locked with a padlock as always, but the noise continued, a rhythmic tapping, as if someone was giving small knocks from the inside. My first impulse was to run to the house and look for my mother. But something stopped me, a curiosity that outweighed fear, a premonition that whatever was in the shed had answers I needed. I remembered that my father kept a copy of the padlock key in his desk drawer. Without thinking too much about it, I entered the house, made sure my mother was occupied. She was talking on the phone in her bedroom, and headed to my father's office. I found the key easily stored in the top drawer. I was about to leave when I noticed something else, a large envelope with a name written on it. Gutierrez. The envelope was open, and without really knowing why, I took a peek inside. It contained photographs, documents with official letterhead, and what appeared to be a detailed report on someone named Eduardo Gutierrez. The photograph showed a middle-aged man followed in various locations, leaving a restaurant, entering an apartment building, even playing with his children in a park. I felt a chill. Why did my father have photos of this man and his family? One document caught my attention. It appeared to be some sort of schedule with dates and locations. The last entry was for the following night with an address and a simple instruction, "Proceed." I left everything exactly as I had found it, and left the office now with the shed key and a new mystery that disturbed me even more than the pale boy. I returned to the garden and opened the padlock with trembling hands. The tapping had ceased, but now there was another sound, that dry gasp, that laugh I knew too well. The inside of the shed was dark and smelled of dampness, earth, and motor oil. The tools hung neatly organized on the wall as my father always kept them. Everything seemed normal. "Are you here?" I whispered, scrutinizing the dark corners. In response, one of the drawers at the bottom began to open slowly without anyone touching it. I approached, divided between terror and curiosity. The drawer contained objects that didn't seem to fit in a normal shed: latex gloves, a bottle of what appeared to be bleach rolls of thick plastic, and something wrapped in a stained cloth. With a hand that didn't seem like my own, I moved the cloth aside. It was a knife, long and thin. What froze my blood wasn't the weapon itself, but the dark stains on the blade stains that hadn't been completely cleaned. At that moment, I felt a presence behind me. I turned slowly, expecting to see the pale boy, but what I found was much worse. My father was at the door of the shed, watching me with an expression I had never seen on his face. "Miguel," he said in a strangely calm voice, "what are you doing here?" I couldn't answer. My hand still held the cloth, revealing the stained knife. My father slowly entered the shed and closed the door behind him. He moved toward me with measured, calculated steps. "There are things children shouldn't see," he said, his voice still calm but with a threatening edge. "Things they couldn't understand." "What is this, Papa?" I managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. "Why do you have—" "It's part of my work," he interrupted now, just a step away from me. "Of what I do to keep us all safe and comfortable. So you can have new toys, a nice house, so your mother never has to work." He extended his hand and took the knife with a familiarity that terrified me. He held it up to the light coming through the small window of the shed, examining it critically. "I didn't clean it well," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "A rookie mistake. I'm becoming careless." Then he looked at me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that reminded me of the pale boy, a vacancy, an absence of real human emotion. "Miguel," he said, placing a hand on my shoulder, "what you saw today, what you found, this can't leave here. Do you understand? It's our secret." I nodded, automatically, too terrified to speak. "Good," he smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now go back to the house. Your mother must be looking for you for dinner." That night I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the knife, the stains, my father's expression. And for the first time I understood what the pale boy had been trying to show me. My father didn't take care of an important man in the sense I had imagined. He wasn't a bodyguard or an assistant or a driver. It was something much darker. And the images I had seen when the pale boy touched me, were they memories, visions of what my father really did? The idea was too horrible to contemplate. That night I expected the pale boy's visit with a mixture of fear and longing. I had questioned, so many questions, and I felt he was the only one who could answer them. But he didn't come. Instead, I heard my parents arguing again, this time with more intensity than ever. "It's too dangerous," my mother was saying, her voice tense. "The boy found the knife, Javier. What will happen when he finds something else? When he starts asking questions we can't answer?" "We've already discussed this," my father replied, his voice a low growl. "I can't leave it, Elena. If I try to get out, they'll kill us all." "Is that what you want, for your children to end up like Ramirez's boy?" There was a silence, and then I heard my mother sob. "Then we should leave," she said finally. "Take the children and disappear. Start over somewhere else." "And you think they won't find us?" My father's voice had become dangerously soft. "He has eyes everywhere. No one escapes his reach." "At least we would have a chance," my mother insisted. "Here we're trapped, waiting for the day you don't come back, or worse, for them to come for all of us." "Tomorrow I have a job," my father said abruptly, changing the subject. "When I return, we'll talk about this more calmly." A job. The word took on a new and terrible meaning for me. And I remembered the envelope I had seen, the name Gutierrez, the date of tomorrow, the simple instruction, "Proceed." I felt sick. My father was going to do something horrible to that man, Eduardo Gutierrez, the man from the photographs, the one who played with his children in the park. I couldn't allow it. But what could I do, a 9-year-old boy, against what appeared to be an organized criminal operation against my own father? The answer came in the most unexpected form. At midnight, when the whole house was silent, I felt the familiar cold presence in my room. I opened my eyes, and there was the pale boy, not under the bed or peering from a corner, but standing by my window looking outside toward the night. He turned slowly toward me, and for the first time I didn't feel fear. Instead, I felt a strange affinity, as if we were finally on the same side of something. The boy extended his hand, those abnormally long fingers open in a clear invitation, And for the first time I accepted. The moment our hands touched, the images returned, but this time with more clarity and coherence. I saw the pale boy when he was still alive, a real boy named Tomas, playing in a park. I saw his father, a man named Ricardo Ramirez, meeting with other people discussing something in hushed voices. I saw my own father, younger but recognizable, watching from a distance. Then the scene changed. Mr. Ramirez was kneeling on a concrete floor, pleading, while a man whose face I couldn't see shouted at him. My father was there holding something in his hand, the same knife I had found in the shed. What happened next made me release Tomas's hand with a horrified gasp, but I couldn't look away from his white eyes, which now seemed to contain all the answers I had been seeking. "He sent you," I whispered, finally understanding. "Your father sent you to warn me." Thomas didn't respond, but his expression changed slightly. For the first time, I saw something beyond that empty smile, sadness, a deep and ancient sadness. "My father—"
Did he do the same to your father as what he plans to do to Gutierrez? Tomas nodded slowly. And then what happened to you?
The image came to my mind without the need for physical contact this time. Tomas hidden in a closet watching what happened to his father. Then my father discovering him. The expression on my father's face as he approached the terrified child with the knife still dripping Ricardo Ramirez's blood. "No!" I denied, tears running down my cheeks. "My father wouldn't do that, not to a child." But even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. The man I had seen in the shed, the man who spoke so casually of not cleaning well, a blood-stained knife, was capable of anything. And now I understood why Tomas had appeared in my life, why he had followed me, why he had tried to communicate with me through objects and visions. He didn't want to scare me. He wanted to warn me. Show me the truth about my father before it was too late, before I became what he was. Because now, with crystal clarity, I understood my father's words. "Someday you'll understand what it means to take care of an important man." It wasn't a simple explanation. It was a promise, a destiny he had planned for me. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, to become what he was, a hitman. "What can I do?" I asked Tomas, my voice broken by fear and desperation. "How can I stop him? How can I protect my family?" Tomas pointed toward the window, toward the outside world. Then with precise movements he began to form words with his lips. This time I made an effort to understand him. "Run," I finally deciphered. "You want us to run away." He nodded vigorously. But how? Where? I was just a child with no money, no resources, nowhere my father or the person he worked for couldn't find me. Then I remembered the conversation I had overheard between my parents. My mother wanted to escape, to take me and Diego far away, start over. Perhaps she knew how to do it. Perhaps together we could find a way. With a resolution I didn't know I possessed, I got out of bed. I had to talk to my mother now while my father slept. I had to tell her about Thomas, about what I had discovered, about the danger Eduardo Gutierrez would face tomorrow. Thomas watched me from the window with an expression I couldn't fully decipher. Was it hope, concern, a mixture of both? "Thank you," I told him, feeling the words were completely inadequate for what I wanted to express. "I'm sorry for what my father did to you, to your family." Thomas slightly inclined his head as if accepting my words. Then, with a fluid movement that didn't seem entirely human, he vanished into the shadows of the room. I took a deep breath, gathering courage, and headed for the door. It was time to face the truth, however terrible it might be. It was time to save my family and perhaps also the Gutierrez family from a fate they didn't deserve. As I walked down the dark hallway toward my parents' bedroom, I vowed that whatever happened, I would never become what my father was. I would never take care of an important man the way he did. That was the moment my childhood truly ended. Not when I first saw Tomas, not when I discovered the knife in the shed, but there in that dark hallway, as I made the conscious decision to confront the truth and act according to my own morality, regardless of the cost. My hand trembled as I raised it to knock on my parents' bedroom door. The Pale Boy, Part 3. My hand trembled as I knocked on my parents' bedroom door. I waited, heart racing, but there was no answer. I knocked again harder this time, but still nothing. Gathering my courage, I turned the handle and pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed was perfectly made, as if no one had slept in it. My father's side of the closet was open, several of his black shirts missing. I felt a wave of confusion, then panic. Where were they? I hurried to Diego's room, flinging the door open without knocking. His bed, too, was empty. The dinosaur-patterned comforter neatly arranged, his favorite stuffed animal gone. "Mama!" I called out, my voice echoing through the silent house. "Diego!" Nothing but the hollow sound of an empty home answered me. I ran downstairs, checking every room, turning on lights as I went. The kitchen was spotless, the living room untouched. On the refrigerator, held by a magnet shaped like a cactus, was a note in my father's precise handwriting. "Miguel had to take your mother and Diego to visit your grandmother. Emergency. Back tomorrow. Leftovers in the fridge. Don't open the door to anyone." "Papa," I stared at the note, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. My grandmother lived in Puebla, a 4-hour drive away. We rarely visited her, and never in the middle of the night for an emergency. And why would they leave me behind? The lie was transparent, but its implications terrified me. Had my father discovered my mother's plans to escape? Had he taken Diego and my mother somewhere safe, or somewhere they couldn't interfere with whatever he had planned? I sank into a kitchen chair, trying to calm my racing thoughts. If my father had left with my mother and Diego, then I was alone in the house. Alone with the knowledge of what my father was planning to do to Eduardo Gutierrez tomorrow. No, not tomorrow, today. The digital clock on the microwave read 1:17 a.m. The job was scheduled for today. I needed to do something, but what I was just a child. No one would believe me if I tried to warn Gutierrez. I didn't even know where he lived, just the meeting location written in my father's documents. The documents. My father's office. I stood up so quickly the chair toppled backward, hitting the tile floor with a crash that sounded deafening in the silent house. I raced back upstairs to my father's office, no longer concerned with being quiet or sneaky. The door was locked. I rattled the handle frantically, then remembered the spare key my father kept hidden behind the framed family photo in the hallway. I retrieved it with trembling fingers and unlocked the door. My father's office was meticulously organized as always. The desk was clear except for a pen holder, a notepad, and a small framed photo of our family taken years ago before Diego was born. I looked at our smiling faces, my father's arm around my mother's shoulder, my gap-toothed grin, and felt a stab of grief for the family I had thought we were. I pulled open the desk drawers one by one. The first contained office supplies, pens, paper clips, a stapler. The second held folders labeled with dates going back several years. The third was locked. I froze, unsure what to do. Then I remembered seeing my father open it once, retrieving the key from beneath the desk blotter. I lifted the leather pad, and there it was, a small silver key. The drawer slid open smoothly. Inside were several manila envelopes, each labeled with a name. I found the one marked Gutierrez and opened it, spreading its contents across the desk. Photographs of Eduardo Gutierrez showed a man in his mid-40s with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. In one photo, he was leaving what appeared to be a government building carrying a briefcase. In another, he was dining with a woman and 2 children, a boy about my age and a younger girl, his family. There were documents, too, printouts of news articles where Gutierrez was mentioned as a prosecutor working on organized crime cases, specifically targeting cartel operations in our state. Reports detailing his daily routine, the school his children attended, the security measures at his home. And most chillingly, a single page with tomorrow's date, an address in a wealthy neighborhood across the city, and a time 7:00 a.m. Below was a hand-drawn map marking Gutierrez's jogging route through a nearby park with an X at a secluded spot where he apparently stopped to stretch, a perfect location for an ambush. My stomach lurched. This wasn't just a plan to kill a man, it was a meticulously crafted assassination designed by someone who had done this many times before. My father. As I stared at the documents, a realization struck me. Gutierrez was trying to bring down the important man my father worked for. He was a prosecutor gathering evidence against a cartel boss, probably the same one who had ordered the death of Thomas and his father years ago. Among the papers, I found a business card with the public prosecutor's office seal and a phone number, Gutierrez's direct line. Without thinking twice, I grabbed the card and reached for the office phone. My hand hovered over the receiver. Would my father be able to check if calls had been made from this line? I couldn't risk it. Instead, I pocketed the card and hurried to my room to retrieve the prepaid phone my mother had given me, for emergencies only. Back in my father's office, I dialed the number with shaking fingers, praying someone would answer at this hour. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to give up when a groggy voice answered. "Diga, Señor Gutierrez." I whispered, suddenly aware of how small my voice sounded. "Quien habla?" The voice sounded more alert, now edged with suspicion. "My name is Miguel," I said, deciding in that moment not to reveal my last name. "I need to warn you, they're planning to kill you this morning at 7 when you go jogging." There was silence on the other end, then the sound of movement as if Gutierrez was sitting up in bed. "Who are you really?" he asked, his voice now fully awake and cautious. How did you get this number?" "That doesn't matter," I replied urgently. "What matters is that you don't go to the park this morning. Stay home with your family. They're watching you. They know your routine." Who's watching me?" "I can't tell you everything, but I'm trying to help. Please believe me. Your life is in danger." Another silence, longer this time. "Why should I believe you?" Gutierrez finally asked. "How do I know this isn't some kind of trap?" "Because—" I paused, aware that what I was about to say would irrevocably change my life. "Because the man they're sending to kill you is my father." I could hear Gutierrez's sharp intake of breath. "Your father," he repeated slowly, "and you're betraying him to warn me." "It's not betrayal," I answered, tears blurring my vision. "It's doing what's right. My father isn't a good person. He's done terrible things, and he'll keep doing them unless someone stops him." "Who is your father, Miguel?" I took a deep breath. "Javier Valenzuela." There was an audible gasp on the other end of the line. "El Fantasma, are you the son of El Fantasma?" The nickname surprised me. I had never heard anyone refer to my father that way. "I don't know what that means," I admitted. "But if you're investigating a man named Ernesto Cantu, then yes, my father works for him." "Dios mío," Gutierrez murmured. "How old are you, kid?" 9. 9 years old," he repeated as if he couldn't believe it. "And you're calling me to warn me about an assassination planned by your own father?" "Yes," I answered simply. There was a long silence, and for a moment I feared Gutierrez had hung up, or worse, that he didn't believe me. "I believe you," he said finally, "and I thank you. What you're doing requires a courage that few adults possess, much less a 9-year-old boy." Relief flooded me so intense I felt slightly dizzy. "So you won't go to the park, you'll stay safe." "I'm going to do something better than that," Gutierrez replied, and for the first time I heard determination in his voice. "I'm going to end all of this today." "How?" "I have enough evidence against Cantu and his organization to file charges," he explained. "I was just waiting to corroborate some final details. But with your testimony, I can proceed right now." "But—" my voice broke. "If you do that, my father will go to jail." "Yes," Gutierrez confirmed, his tone gentle but firm. "Probably for the rest of his life, given the gravity of his crimes." I knew that would be the consequence, of course. It was the inevitable result of my actions, and yet hearing it said aloud made reality hit me with its full force. "What will happen to my mother and my brother?" I asked, tears flowing freely now. "What will happen to me?" There was a moment of silence, as if Gutierrez was carefully considering his response. "Your mother and your brother are safe," he said finally. "We have them under protection." What? Surprise nearly made me drop the phone. How my father said he sent someone to find them. And someone found them, Gutierrez confirmed. But not your father's men, mine. Your mother contacted my office 2 days ago, Miguel. She also wanted to put an end to all this. The revelation left me breathless. My mother had been planning this, working with Gutierrez behind my father's back. Suddenly, many things made sense. Her secretive phone calls, her insistence that we should flee her apparent escape last night. "Where are they?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "In a safe place," Gutierrez replied. "And you should be with them. Are you alone at home?" "Yes. Listen to me carefully, Miguel. I want you to gather some essential things, clothes, any important personal items, and put them in a backpack. Then I want you to leave the house and go to the bus stop at the corner of your street. Do you know which one I mean?" "Yes," I answered, trying to maintain composure despite the torrent of emotions flooding me. "Good. In exactly 20 minutes, a blue car will stop there. The driver will tell you he comes from Eduardo. Get into the car with him and he'll take you to your mother and brother." "And my father? What will happen to him?" There was a pause, and when Gutierrez spoke again, his voice was carefully neutral. "We'll take care of him, Miguel. You don't have to worry about that now." But I did worry. Despite everything I had discovered, despite the horrible truths, I now knew part of me still loved my father. Part of me still hoped there was some way to save him, not just from Cantu, but from himself. "Please," I said, my voice breaking, "don't kill him. Promise me you won't kill him." "Miguel," Gutierrez began, but I interrupted him. "Promise me." I insisted, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I know he's done terrible things. I know he deserves to go to jail, but he's still my father." There was a long silence, and for a moment I feared I had asked too much. Finally, Gutierrez sighed. "I promise we'll do everything possible to capture him alive," he said. "But you must understand that your father is a dangerous man, Miguel. If he resists, if he tries to fight—" "I know," I replied quietly. "Just please try." "I will," Gutierrez promised. "Now gather your things and head to the bus stop. And Miguel, thank you. What you've done today will save many lives, including mine." I hung up and stood motionless for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of what I had just done. I had betrayed my father. I had set in motion events that would lead to his imprisonment or worse. But I had also saved an innocent man. I had helped expose a dangerous criminal. And perhaps, just perhaps, I had saved my own soul as well. With mechanical movements, I returned to my room and began to pack. Clothes, a few photographs, the red car with the strange symbols engraved on it. Everything I might need for a new life, a life away from the shadows and secrets that had defined my childhood. As I stuffed the last items into my backpack, I felt a familiar presence in the room. I turned slowly, expecting to see Tomas, expecting one final encounter with the pale boy who had changed my life forever. He was there, not in his usual form, semi-hidden, watching me from the shadows, but standing in the center of the room, fully visible in the dawn light that was beginning to filter through the window. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time without fear. Now I could clearly see the details of his appearance, the pale skin with that bluish tint, the white eyes with black veins, the dark liquid dripping from his mouth. But I also saw something else, an immense sadness, a loneliness that I recognized because it was similar to mine. "Thank you," I said simply, my voice barely a whisper, "for warning me, for showing me the truth." Tomas slightly inclined his head as if accepting my words. Then slowly he extended his hand toward me. This time I didn't hesitate. I took his hand expecting the usual torrent of violent images, but instead I felt a strange peace, a sensation of closure. A single image filled my mind, Tomas, not as the pale, deformed specter I knew, but as a normal boy smiling, holding the hand of a man I assumed was his father. They were standing in front of what appeared to be an amusement park, both happy, alive, complete. When the image faded and I opened my eyes, Thomas was still there, but something had changed in him. His appearance was still supernatural, but the desperation in his eyes had been replaced by something that almost looked like hope. "What will happen to you now?" I asked, though I didn't expect a verbal response. To my surprise, Thomas moved his lips, forming words that for the first time I could understand clearly. Rest. A shiver ran through me, not of fear, but of a more complex, deeper emotion. Will I see you again? Thomas slowly shook his head. Then his lips formed another word, thanks. And with that he began to fade, not like the other times, hiding in the shadows or suddenly disappearing, but gradually like a photograph exposed too long to light, losing definition until only a slight outline remained, and then nothing. I stood staring at the empty space where Thomas had been aware that I had witnessed something extraordinary, the release of a tormented soul, the end of a cycle of horror and revenge that had begun long before my birth. Taking my backpack, I cast one last glance at the room that had been mine for the past year. So many memories, so many fears, so many secrets. Then, with a resolution I didn't know I possessed, I headed toward the door, toward an uncertain future, but for the first time in a long time, free from the weight of the ghosts, both literal and metaphorical, that had haunted me for so long. As I left the house, dawn was breaking on the horizon, bathing the neighborhood in a golden light that seemed to promise a new beginning. I headed toward the bus stop, aware that each step was taking me not only away from my old life, but also from the darkness that had defined it. The blue car was already waiting when I arrived. The driver lowered the window and looked at me expectantly. "Miguel," he asked. "I come from Eduardo." I nodded and got into the vehicle, closing the door behind me. As the car pulled away from my neighborhood, from my house, from everything I had known, I felt a mixture of emotions: fear, sadness, relief, hope. "Are my mom and brother okay?" I asked the driver. "They're perfectly fine," he replied with a reassuring smile. "Anxious to see you." I nodded, allowing myself to relax slightly for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. As the car advanced through the increasingly busy streets of the city, my mind returned to my father. Where would he be now? Waiting in the park, looking for Gutierrez? Or had he already been captured? Part of me wanted to hate my father for what he was, for what he had done. Another part loved him desperately despite everything. But the largest part of me simply felt a deep sadness for the man who had chosen darkness, who had believed there was no other option. There's always a choice, I had insisted the night before, and I had made mine. Looking out the window at the increasingly bright sky, I made a silent promise I would never become what my father was. I would never accept that darkness was inevitable. I would never believe there was no other choice. The car stopped in front of an anonymous building in an area of the city I didn't recognize. The driver indicated that I should follow him. "Your family is waiting for you," he said, guiding me toward the entrance. Taking a deep breath, I prepared to face whatever the future had in store for us. I had managed to escape the fate my father had planned for me. I had helped save an innocent man, and perhaps in the process I had redeemed a small portion of my family's sins. As we entered the building, leaving the dawn light behind, I felt an invisible weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time since I could remember, I didn't feel the presence of Tomas. There were no white eyes watching me, no cold spots in the room, no quiet laughter in the dark. But the lessons he had taught me remained the truth, no matter how painful was the only path to freedom. The lobby was bustling with activity despite the early hour. Men and women in suits moved purposefully, some talking into radios, others reviewing documents. The driver led me through the controlled chaos to an elevator where he pressed the button for the 5th floor. "Señor Gutierrez is waiting for you," he explained, "along with your family." As the elevator ascended, my mind raced with questions. How had my mother managed to contact Gutierrez without my father knowing? How long had she been planning this escape? And most importantly, what would happen to us now? The elevator doors opened to reveal a long hallway with offices on either side. The driver led me to a door at the end, knocked twice, and then opened it without waiting for a response. The office was spacious, with large windows overlooking the city. Eduardo Gutierrez, whom I recognized immediately from the photographs, stood behind a desk covered with files and documents. But I barely noticed him because seated on a sofa against the wall were my mother and Diego. Miguel. My mother cried, jumping to her feet and rushing toward me. She enveloped me in a tight embrace that smelled of her familiar perfume mixed with tears. Diego, his small face puffy from crying or lack of sleep, clung to her side. "Mama," I whispered, burying my face in her shoulder. I was so scared. She pulled back, holding my face between her hands, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "I'm so sorry, mijo. I wanted to take you with us, but your father, he came home unexpectedly. We had to leave right then." "It's okay," I said, though nothing about our situation was truly okay. "I'm here now." Gutierrez cleared his throat gently. "Miguel, I can't tell you how grateful I am for your warning. You showed incredible courage." I turned to face him, suddenly self-conscious. The man standing before me looked tired but kind, nothing like the cold, calculating prosecutor my father's documents had portrayed. "I just did what I thought was right," I said simply. "That's more than many adults would do," Gutierrez replied. He gestured for us to sit. My mother, Diego, and I settled onto the sofa while he took a chair across from us. "I need to explain what will happen next," he said, his tone serious but gentle. "My team has already moved against Cantu's organization. We are executing search warrants at multiple locations, including his home and businesses. Several arrests have been made." "And my father?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Gutierrez's expression softened. "We have officers waiting at the park where he was supposed to carry out his assignment. Others are at your house. We'll find him, Miguel, and as I promised, we'll do everything possible to take him alive." My mother reached over and squeezed my hand. I realized she had no idea I'd spoken to Gutierrez, that I had been the one to trigger this morning's events. "What will happen to us?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hand. "You'll be placed in the witness protection program," Gutierrez explained. "New identities, a new city, a fresh start. Your testimony against Cantu and his operation will be crucial in ensuring he never hurts another family." My mother nodded, her face a mixture of relief and sorrow. "And Javier? If he surrenders peacefully, he'll face trial. I won't lie to you, Elena, the charges are serious. Murder, conspiracy, organized crime activities. He will likely spend the rest of his life in prison." I watched my mother's face as she absorbed this information. There was pain there, but also a resignation that suggested she had made peace with this outcome long ago. "And if he doesn't surrender peacefully?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Gutierrez met my gaze directly. "Then the officers have orders to protect themselves and the public. I hope it doesn't come to that, Miguel. I truly do." The gravity of our situation settled over me like a heavy blanket. We were safe, but at what cost? My father might die today. If he lived, he would spend decades in prison. Either way, our family as I had known it was gone forever. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. A young woman entered, her expression urgent. "Señor Gutierrez, there's a situation at the Valenzuela house. You're needed immediately." Gutierrez stood quickly. "Stay here," he told us. "I'll return as soon as I can." As he left, I felt a cold dread spreading through my chest. A situation at our house could only mean one thing: my father had returned home and found me missing. My mother pulled me and Diego close, as if trying to shield us from whatever was happening across the city. Diego, too young to fully understand, simply buried his face against her side. But I knew that whatever was unfolding at our house would determine the course of our lives. Hours seemed to pass in that office, though the clock on the wall showed it was barely 45 minutes. No one came to update us. My mother tried to distract Diego with stories, but her voice was strained, her eyes constantly darting to the door. Finally, Gutierrez returned. One look at his face told me something had gone terribly wrong. "Elena," he said, sitting heavily in the chair across from us. "Miguel, I'm afraid I have difficult news." My mother's arm tightened around my shoulders. "Is it Javier?" Gutierrez nodded, his expression grave. "He returned to your house this morning, presumably looking for Miguel." When our officers approached, he paused, glancing at me uncertainly. "Please tell us everything," my mother said firmly. "We need to know." Gutierrez sighed. He was armed. He refused to surrender. There was an exchange of gunfire. The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the edge of the sofa, trying to steady myself. "Is he—" My mother couldn't finish the question. "He's alive," Gutierrez assured us quickly, "but seriously wounded. He's being transported to the hospital under guard." Relief and horror battled within me. My father was alive but hurt. Shot by police because of the warning I'd given Gutierrez. "Can we see him?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Gutierrez hesitated. "It's complicated, Miguel. He's in custody, facing serious charges, and there are security concerns. Cantu's people might try to silence him before he can testify." "But he's my father," I insisted, tears welling in my eyes. "I need to see him." My mother pulled me closer. "Miguel, mijo, it might not be possible right away. We need to be patient." "Your mother is right," Gutierrez said gently. "But I promise you this, once the doctors say he's stable and we've established proper security, I'll arrange for you to visit him. You have my word." I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Everything was happening so fast, spinning beyond my control. Just yesterday, I had been a normal boy living in a nice house with what seemed like a normal family. Now my father was a wounded prisoner, my mother and brother were in protective custody, and I was sitting in a prosecutor's office responsible for unraveling the life I had known. "What happens now?" My mother asked, her voice steadier than I would have expected. "Now we keep you safe while we build our case against Cantu," Gutierrez explained. "Within a few days, we'll relocate you to a secure location in another state. You'll have new identities, a new home, a fresh start." "Will we ever be able to come back?" I asked. Gutierrez's expression was sympathetic but realistic. "Not for many years, Miguel. Cantu has a long reach and an even longer memory. Until he and his entire network are behind bars, you'll need to remain hidden." I thought about school, my few friends, our house with its fruit trees in the backyard. All of it gone in a single night. And yet, hadn't I already lost it all the moment I discovered the truth about my father? Hadn't our normal life always been an illusion? "We'll be okay, Miguel," my mother said, as if reading my thoughts. "We have each other. That's what matters." I looked at her, then at Diego, who had fallen asleep against her side, exhausted by the night's events. They were my family now, the real family, not the facade we had lived behind for so long. "I know, Mama," I replied. And for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope. As we waited for the arrangements to be made for our relocation, I found myself thinking of Tomas. Had he found peace now that his mission was complete? Would he watch over us somehow, this boy who had died so terribly yet had saved me from a similar fate? I hoped so. I hoped that wherever spirits go and they're finally free, Tomas was reunited with his father, both of them at peace. Gutierrez's phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. He answered, listening intently, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "When?" he asked sharply. "How many?" "Yes, I understand. Double the security and notify the surgical team. I'll be there as soon as I can." He ended the call and turned to us, his face grave. "There's been an incident at the hospital. Armed men tried to enter the secure wing where your father is being treated. Our officers stopped them, but it's clear Cantu knows Javier has been captured and wants to ensure he doesn't talk." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Will they try again?" "Possibly," Gutierrez admitted, "which is why we need to move you immediately. It's no longer safe to keep you in the city." "But what about my father?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "If Cantu's men tried to get to him once, we're increasing security and moving him to a different facility as soon as he's stable enough," Gutierrez assured me. "Miguel, I promise you we will do everything humanly possible to keep him alive." I wanted to believe him, but the cold knot of dread in my stomach wouldn't dissolve. I had set these events in motion, and now my father's life was in danger from the very man he had served so faithfully. "I need to see him," I insisted. "Before we go, please." Gutierrez and my mother exchanged glances. "Miguel, my mother began gently. "It's too dangerous." "I don't care," I cried, surprising myself with the intensity of my emotion. "He's still my father. What if he dies and I never get to say goodbye? What if he thinks I hate him?" Tears streamed down my face, and I made no effort to wipe them away. My mother pulled me into a tight embrace, her own tears wetting my hair. "Oh, Mijo," she whispered, "your father knows you love him. He's always known." "But I betrayed him," I sobbed into her shoulder. "I'm the reason he got shot. I'm the reason Cantu's men are trying to kill him now."
"No," my mother said, firmly pulling back to look me in the eyes. "None of this is your fault, Miguel. Your father made his choices long ago. He chose to work for a monster. He chose to hurt people. You didn't betray him. You saved him from becoming even more lost than he already was." I stared at her, trying to absorb her words through my grief. Had I saved my father, or had I condemned him? Gutierrez cleared his throat softly. "There might be a way," he said, his expression thoughtful. "Not a physical visit that's simply too dangerous right now, but perhaps a video call once he's conscious. Would that help, Miguel?" I nodded quickly, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. "Yes, please. I'll arrange it," he promised. "But right now we need to get you to safety." Within the hour, we were escorted to a waiting SUV with tinted windows. Diego, still half asleep, clung to my mother as we were hustled into the back seat.
Armed officers surrounded the vehicle as we pulled away from the building. As we drove through the city streets toward the highway, I gazed out at the familiar landmarks, knowing it might be years before I saw them again. The park where I had played as a younger child. The ice cream shop where my father would sometimes take us on Sundays. The movie theater where we had watched animated films together, my father laughing at jokes that went over my head. Had any of it been real? Had he truly loved us, or were we just another part of his cover, the family man facade that hid the killer underneath? I would probably never know. And perhaps it didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that we were alive, that we had a chance at a new beginning. What mattered was that no more families would be destroyed by my father's hands, no more children orphaned like Thomas had been. As the city fell away behind us, an open countryside spread out on either side of the highway, I felt an unexpected sense of lightness. The burden of secrets I had carried for so long, the pale boy under my bed, the growing awareness of my father's true nature, the fear of what might happen to my family, all of it was lifting like morning fog burned away by the sun. We were heading toward an uncertain future, yes, but for the first time in my life it was a future built on truth instead of lies. My mother reached across Diego's sleeping form to take my hand. Her eyes, though tired and shadowed with grief, held a strength I had never fully appreciated before. "We'll be okay, Miguel," she said softly. "I promise you that." And despite everything, despite the loss and fear and upheaval, I believed her. The SUV sped north, carrying us away from the only home I had ever known, toward a new life free from the shadows that had haunted us for so long. As I watched the landscape blur past the window, I thought I caught a glimpse of something in the distance, a small figure standing by the roadside, pale against the dark trees. I blinked, and it was gone. Just a trick of the light, perhaps. Or a final farewell from the friend who had saved me from my father's fate. "Goodbye, Tomas," I whispered against the glass. "Rest well." And somewhere deep inside, in that place where truth resonates beyond words, I felt a sense of peace. Tomas had found his rest. Now it was time for me to find mine. 15 years have passed since that dawn that forever changed my life. 15 years since the last time I saw my father, since the last time I felt the presence of Tomas Ramirez. My mother Diego and I started a new life under the Witness Protection Program. New names, new city, new identities. It was difficult at first, especially for my mother, who had to bear not only the weight of reinventing herself, but also the guilt of having been complicit through her silence for so many years. Diego, being younger, adapted more quickly. For him, our past soon became a hazy memory, almost like a dream from which he had awakened. For me, it was different. I never could forget. I never wanted to forget. Gutierrez kept his promise. The evidence he had combined with my mother's testimony was sufficient to dismantle much of Cantu's organization. Many were arrested, many more fled. Cantu himself disappeared and is rumored to be living under a false identity in some country without an extradition treaty. As for my father, Gutierrez's promise was also kept, though not in the way I had expected. When officers arrived at the park that morning, my father wasn't there. He never made it to his job. In fact, he disappeared completely. For years, the authorities searched for him. International alerts were issued, leads were followed in dozens of countries, but Javier Valenzuela El Fantasma was never found. At first I lived with the constant fear that he would appear one day, that he would have somehow tracked us down, that he would come to take revenge for what he would consider a betrayal. With time, that fear faded, replaced by a kind of resigned acceptance. If my father was alive, if he ever found us, I would face that moment when it came. Meanwhile, I moved forward with my life. I studied law, inspired in part by Gutierrez, with whom I maintained contact throughout the years. I specialized in child protection cases, working to ensure that no child had to go through what I went through, or worse, what Tomas went through. The memory of Tomas never completely left me. Sometimes in dreams I would see his pale face again, his white eyes with black veins, but it was no longer an image that terrified me. Instead, it reminded me why I did what I did, why I had chosen the path I had chosen. 3 months ago, I received a call from Gutierrez, now retired from prosecution and working as a security consultant. His voice sounded tense, urgent. "They've found a body," he said without preamble, "in a mass grave on the outskirts of Ciudad Juarez. The dental identification matches your father's." The news should have impacted me more than it did. Perhaps deep down I'd always known that my father hadn't escaped, that his disappearance had a more sinister explanation. "When did he die?" I asked, surprised by the calmness in my own voice. "The forensic examiner estimates approximately 15 years ago," Gutierrez replied. "Shortly after that morning?" I felt a shiver run down my spine. 15 years. My father had died the same day I had warned Gutierrez, the same day Tomas had finally found rest. How? I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer, but I needed to hear it anyway. "A shot to the head," said Gutierrez, his tone professionally neutral. "Cartel-style execution, probably ordered by Cantu when he learned the operation had been compromised." I nodded, though Gutierrez couldn't see me. It made sense. In the world my father moved in, failure was paid for with life. "There's something else," Gutierrez continued after a pause. "They found something in his pocket, an object that seems to have been there since then." "What object?" "A toy car, small, metallic red with black details. It has some strange marks like symbols engraved on the surface." I felt the air leave my lungs. My car, the one Tomas had taken, had marked with protection symbols and then returned. The one I had packed the morning I left my old life behind, but never found in my backpack when we reached our new home. "Do you want me to send it to you?" asked Gutierrez. I considered the offer for a moment. Part of me wanted to see that car once more, to hold it, to confirm it was really the same one. But another part, perhaps wiser, knew it was better to leave some things in the past. "No," I finally replied. "Leave it with him." After hanging up, I sat in my office, looking out the window at the city I now called home, so different from the one where I had grown up. The skyscrapers gleamed in the afternoon sun, people moved in the streets, oblivious to the ghosts that inhabited my mind. That night, for the first time in many years, I dreamed of Tomas. We were in a place I didn't recognize, a white, empty space that seemed to extend infinitely. Tomas no longer looked like the pale, deformed boy I remembered. He was a normal child with healthy skin, brown eyes, and a genuine smile. "Why the car?" I asked in the dream, somehow knowing Tomas would understand the question. "To protect him," he replied, his voice clear and strong, not the choked whisper I had heard only once 15 years ago. "To protect you." "From what?" "From becoming him." I woke with a start, Tomas's words echoing in my mind. Was it possible? Had my father in his final moments tried to protect me from following in his footsteps? Had he finally understood too late that there is always a choice I'll never know for certain? The man who was my father died with his secrets buried in an anonymous grave along with so many other victims of a senseless war. But sometimes when work becomes too dark, when cases of abused and forgotten children threaten to overwhelm me, I remember Tomas, both the spectral boy who terrified me and the smiling child from my dream, and I find the strength to continue. Because I learned the most important lesson of all: ghosts don't always come to torment us. Sometimes they come to save us. And perhaps, just perhaps, by saving others, we can finally find redemption for ourselves. Every year on the anniversary of that morning when my life changed forever, I visit the local cemetery. Not because my father is buried there, his body remains in that mass grave in Mexico, but because I need a place to remember to honor not only his memory, but also that of Tomas Ramirez, the boy who died too young and waited too long to find rest. I leave two things in a small secluded corner of the cemetery: a toy car, similar to the one that was once mine, and a small crucifix, a symbol of protection against the evils of this world. It's a ritual that helps me remember that we all have our own ghosts, that we all struggle with our own shadows, and that in the end what really matters are not the ghosts that haunt us, but how we choose to face them. Last week, while performing this annual ritual, I had a strange sensation as if someone was watching me. I looked up, and for an instant so brief that I might have imagined it, I thought I saw two figures in the distance, a boy holding the hand of a tall man. I blinked, and they had vanished. Perhaps it was my imagination, or perhaps in some plane that we cannot fully comprehend, a boy named Tomas finally found his father, and together they found the peace that this world denied them. And perhaps someday my father will find that peace too. And I, who am no longer the terrified child I once was, will finally be able to forgive him completely. In the meantime, I'll continue living with my memories with my own ghosts. I'll continue doing what I can to ensure that no other child has to see what I saw, that no other child has to become what I almost became. Because if there's one thing I learned from Thomas, it's that even the dead can redeem us if we're willing to listen to their message. And his message was clear: there is always a choice. Always. After finishing work for the day, I returned to my apartment on the outskirts of the city. It's a modest place, nothing like the luxurious home where I grew up, but it's mine paid for with honestly earned money. The walls are lined with law books and framed diplomas, testaments to the path I chose for myself. I went through my evening routine, mechanically checking mail, making a simple dinner, reviewing case notes for the following day. It was only when I entered my bedroom that something stopped me in my tracks. There on my desk, where I was certain I had left nothing but a legal pad and a few pens that morning, sat a toy car. Not just any toy car, a perfect replica of the one that had been found with my father. Red metal with black details small enough to fit in the palm of my hand. And on its surface, barely visible unless you knew to look for them, were the same protection symbols that Tomas had carved all those years ago. I approached slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Where had it come from? My apartment was always locked when I was away, and I lived alone. The windows were sealed, the security system modern and reliable. With trembling fingers, I picked up the car. It was cool to the touch, heavier than it looked, exactly as I remembered the original. I turned it over, examining every detail. It was identical, impossibly perfectly identical, to the one that should have been buried with my father in Ciudad Juarez. A chill ran down my spine, not of fear, but of recognition. I slowly raised my eyes to the mirror hanging on the wall across from my desk. For just a moment, a fraction of a second, so brief I could have missed it with a blink, I saw him. Not the pale, monstrous figure that had terrified my childhood, but the boy from my dream-normal hole with warm brown eyes and a gentle smile. Thomas standing just behind my reflection, his hand raised in a gesture that might have been farewell or perhaps simply acknowledgement. Then he was gone, and I was alone with my reflection once more. I placed the car carefully on my nightstand, a reminder that Some connections transcend death itself. That night, for the first time since I was 9 years old, I didn't check under my bed before lying down to sleep. I knew there was nothing there anymore, nothing to fear at least, and as I drifted toward sleep, I thought I heard a whisper so faint it might have been just the wind outside my window. Gracias, Miguel, descansa bien. Thank you, Miguel. Rest well. I smiled into the darkness, finally understanding that some ghosts never truly leave us, nor should they. Some hauntings are a kind of blessing, a reminder that we are never really alone, even in our darkest moments. Gracias a ti, Tomás, I whispered back. Por todo. Thank you, Tomás, for everything.